Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Welcome, friends. This is Dane Rome, your announcer for today's Last Days Beacon program. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. And just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with Bible prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You'll find a donate link on the homepage. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Thank you for your prayers and support for this faith ministry. September is anniversary month for Southwest Prophecy Ministries. It was just 2 years ago on September 1st, 2015, that this ministry was launched. In celebration of God's faithfulness and yours, we're offering celebration pricing for September's featured product, the Watchman Chronicles. I'll give you more details at the end of today's program, but now let's join Dr. Dave Schnitker as he talks with L.A. Marzulli about his brand new DVD entitled The Watchman Chronicles.
It is a great joy and privilege to welcome L.A. Marzulli back on our program today. This is the second of 3 programs that we will be undertaking to discuss his latest DVD, The Watchman Chronicles. In their own words, UFOs are real. And I get the impression from L.A. that there will be future DVDs on this subject as well, as he continues and deepens his research and the interviews that he is conducting with those who truly say, I have seen a UFO. And having viewed this film, these folks don't look crazy to me. They look like they're intelligent, rational human beings that have had some bizarre experiences, and they've courageously stepped forward and are sharing that information with us. Well, as I mentioned last week, I am no stranger to L.A. I've had the privilege of interviewing him in recent years, both at this ministry and a previous ministry. Also got to know him a bit at a prophecy conference a few years ago. And so it's a real privilege to have L.A. Back with us today to share the fruits of his research. Well, L.A., welcome back to our show today.
Great to be here. It's an honor for me. Thank you.
For those who missed last week's program, could you share a little bit about your ministry and give your website address, because you have an abundance of other films and books that you have produced through the years?
Well, the main website is lamarzulli.net, www.lamarzulli.net, and you can check out all the films and books that we have up there. We've done 10 of the Watcher series, and I've started a new series called The Watchman Chronicles, and the first offering of that is In Their Own Words, UFOs Are Real, and that's the film we're discussing today, so it's always good to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, last week we talked about an interesting conjunction that was not at the forefront of my thinking, but it should have been, and that is the restoration of the ancient state of Israel. One of the signal miracles of our day, that a nation that was scattered almost 2,000 years ago has returned to statehood, the Jewish state, which of course was recognized by the United Nations in 1948. After the cataclysm of the Holocaust, one of the good things and positive things that came out of that dark period in America's and the world's history, really, was the allowance of Jews from all over the world to return to Israel in fulfillment of Bible prophecy, both Old and New Testament, abundantly testifies to the return of Israel in the latter days. And that, of course, happened in 1948. But L.A., you perceptively pointed out in our last program that the occurrences of UFOs also began to accelerate at that same time. Well, let's talk about one of the more well-known occurrences. Of course, Americans are kept in the dark pretty much by our government. But something strange happened in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. Tell us about it.
Well, the whole Roswell alleged crash that happened there has been covered up literally for decades. And some people like Stanton Friedman sort of blew the lid off of that. In my book, Further Evidence, I sat down with Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. Why is that name important? Because Jesse Marcel Sr., his father, was the 409th Bomber security officer, intelligence officer, during the time of the Roswell crash. So he was there, and he was called out by Mac Brazil to examine the wreckage. And he brought some of the wreckage home and showed his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., he passed away a few years ago. He's a medical doctor, and his wife, and they never forgot it. And so Jesse Marcel Jr., I did a sit-down interview with him, and he came on the record and he told me, without any, ifs, ands, or buts, no doubts, that what he handled was not of this world. Period. It had nothing to do with a weather balloon. In fact, the Army the original telegram was, Army recovers crashed flying disc. And then within 48 hours, that was redacted. It was a weather balloon. And so Roswell has been in the public eye off and on for decades. What's interesting is, in my line of work, I get lots and lots of emails from people from all over the world sometimes. And folks, if you're out there and you've had an encounter, specifically if you've got video or pictures, that's even better. Shoot me an email, la@lamarzulli.net, la@lamarzulli.net, and I will interview you if I like the photograph and I think it's the real thing, and you can come on the record and talk about your encounter, because people need to understand that this isn't going away. In fact, we talked last week, the numbers are through the roof. The phenomenon is real, burgeoning, and not going away. That being said, back to Roswell, I get this letter from a woman, and one thing leads to another. It was an email, and we began to chat because she had some artifacts that's from a client, and one of them had an elongated skull, small little figurine carved out of quartz or something, or sandstone. I'm not sure what it actually is carved out of, but it's a small figurine. And so I purchased this from her, and one thing led to another, and she stated that she had a story to tell. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, what this woman does for a living is she'll go into people who are terminally ill and liquidate their estates and take that money and use it for medicals or family or whatever they want to do, to do with it, and she takes a commission from that. And so she said that she was in the process of handling the affairs of a man by the name of Colonel Hill, Colonel Jesse Hill. And Colonel Hill was in the OSS. He was military, career military OSS, which is the forerunner of the CIA. He had 4 degrees, and she got to know this man very well over a period of about 2 years. And one day she's chatting with him, because she would visit him every day. She was chatting with him, and she said, well, what about Roswell? And he looks at her and he goes, well, what about Roswell? And she asked him, well, was it a weather balloon? Was it really a weather balloon? And he kind of ducks his head down and thinks for a minute, as if to say, well, should I really be talking about this? What's interesting is, essentially, Colonel Hill's testimony is a deathbed confession. He passed away a month after he told Jim and Carolyn his testimony. And basically, they come on the record in their own words in the film and talk about this. And they say that, they state very matter-of-factly that Colonel Hill stated emphatically that it was not a weather balloon, that it was a disc, that parts of the wreckage were carted off to Wright-Patterson Field, Ohio, and that there were 2 bodies that he was aware of. And he was flown in. Hill was stationed at Dallas-Fort Worth, and within 48 hours after the incident, they flew him into Roswell, and he attempted to communicate with the one alien that apparently was alive. And again, you say, well, L.A., you just told us earlier that you don't believe in aliens. So what are these? And these little grays with the dark black eyes, in my opinion, are avatar bodies. They're avatars. They're created by Satan himself, and these house the demonic spirits, which are earthbound. And this is how they're enabled to manifest. Because we know a demon cannot, I'll say that again, a demon cannot manifest unless it indwells something. A fallen angel, in my opinion, can manifest any place and any time it wants to, for the most part. They don't need bodies to inhabit. Demons do. Disembodied spirits of the Nephilim is what demons are, in my opinion. So he was there, and he told Jim and Carolyn on the record that one was deceased, the other one was alive, and he tried to communicate with it in some fashion. So it's groundbreaking information, and I mean, I just told your audience that, but there's so much in the film. There's so much in the film, so much information in the film. And obviously, in a short little 15-minute burst like this, we can barely cover, some of the highlights, but we could try, and that's what, I would just tell your people to, if they're at all interested in the subject, it's an hour and 37-minute long. You sell it on your site, and it's what's happening. And I think it's becoming a great deception, and I think we're on the cusp of it.
Now, one of the things that you also share in the film was an amazing story of an individual who went into an underground base, government base, very credible individual. And I didn't get any impression that he was on LSD or any mind-altering drugs. Could you flesh out what this individual told you about his experience?
What's interesting about this, David, is I have two whistleblowers, whistleblower 1, whistleblower 2, that come on the record. And there's I appear on film before this segment in the film, and I sort of make a statement to the viewers saying, look, I have no way of vetting this, absolutely none. But I went with it because they're two different people from two different locations in the country talking about the same thing, and yet their experiences are 30 years apart, roughly. So I was very interested by that, but I left it by saying, you folks be the judge. I'm reporting, you decide type of thing. So that's all I can do. Whistleblower 1 comes on the record, and he has a friend that he's worked with in typical alphabet agency in the government for years. They're both semi-retired, and this man was telling him that his brother-in-law or son-in-law came and informed him that he was in an underground base working side-by-side aliens. Now that sounds completely crazy, but the reason why this man told him this is because he had to tell somebody, because he was bothered by it. He was shell-shocked by it, frankly, who wouldn't be? And so he sort of got it off his chest. The other one, whistleblower 2, had an experience that goes back about 30 years ago, maybe a little longer. And this guy was being groomed in one of the armed forces, and he was sort of being shuttled around by military brass, that type of thing, and being doted on, and special privileges, all this kind of stuff. And one night, they drove out. They got them all liquored up, and they drove out to this underground base, and they down in the mountain they went. And again, Wesley San Giorgi brings all this to life with his incredible computer-generated imagery. So, hats off to Wesley. But David, the bottom line is that he goes down into this base, and what he sees is astonishing. He sees flying saucers, discs. He sees the Greys that are working side by side, and the Greys are the little black, the little gray aliens with the large black eyes and the large heads. And he's just taken aback by what he's looking at, absolutely astounded by what he's looking at. And he's so overwhelmed that he basically freaks out and doesn't want anything to do with the program, doesn't want anything to do with it. And the debriefing is especially harsh. And, he showed me all his credentials, and he was very nervous about coming on the record. I had to disguise his voice and black his face out, or hide his face out, censor his face out. So it just gives you an idea. Here are two different witnesses from two walks of life, different parts of the country, and yet they're talking about the same phenomenon.
That in itself gives it a great deal of credibility. You know, independent witnesses who, without any collaboration at all, share corroborating stories. I mean, you can be a naysayer, but at some point the evidence becomes overwhelming. Now let's veer into one other interesting subject that you have a lot of experience in, and that is alien abductions. We were talking before the program about a gentleman that you interviewed named Al, who claims that not only he but his car was abducted. Would you share with us about that story?
Al Matthews becomes the centerpiece of the film, and it didn't start out that way. But during the editing process, and I did all the editing on the film, and watching, I just was taken aback by Al's story. And the bottom line is Al was taken numerous times by these entities. And he was driving home from work, and this is in Ottawa, eastern part of Canada. And he knows, because he's been through this numerous times, that he's about to be taken. And sure enough, he's taken. He wakes up 4 hours later, and the entire car is vibrating in this brightest, whitest light you've ever seen as it's being slowly lowered from the craft onto a dark, deserted highway, to quote the Eagles, but a dark road. And the car, it lands on the ground. He's still too stunned to do anything. The car starts itself and begins to drive itself. And until about 20 seconds later, he can bring his hands up and he's back in control. And he doesn't know where he is. He sees a sign. He realizes he's about 120 kilometers from where he should be. He looks at his watch. It's 4 hours of missing time. So, once again, what are we to do with stories like this, David? Dismiss them? As Paul Baker would say, send them off to the pharmaceutical world? Is that what we're supposed to do? See, I don't think so. I think we're supposed to, as Christians, we have answers to these supernatural problems, because they need a supernatural answer to the problem, because the secular man has no idea. And sending it off to the pharmaceutical world or calling someone delusional just because they've had an experience like this is, in my opinion, incredibly harsh. People from all walks of life come on the record in their own words. We have pilots, medical doctors, and others, and that's what's interesting about the film. We've just got some great people coming on the record talking about their experiences in their own words.
And these aren't individuals who have sought these experiences or claim to be experts in what they're reporting. That's my perception. These are just everyday folks who, through no invitation or prior interest, experience these bizarre, unexplainable, certainly our secular society has no explanation for these events, and they are left with the question of why them, and what do I do with this information? Now, let me ask this. Did you find that at least many of those that you interviewed, was this a cathartic, encouraging experience for them to be heard and believed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. For everyone. In some cases, some of these people had never told the story before. So for them, it was extremely cathartic to come on the record and do this. And, hats off to the people. I did an interview last night with Al, sort of a follow-up interview. He called me last week and wanted to come back on the record, so we Skyped him, and that's up on my YouTube channel, L.A. Marzulli, on the YouTube channel, and it's Al Matthews. It's a UFO update, Al Matthews. It was just posted today, so gives you an idea of you know what, David? I mean, this is what I do full time. I write books. I create documentary films. We're in the process of creating a documentary film on the Nephilim, and there's also one coming out in the fall, which I won't tell you the title. That's very secret. But we're filming both of them already, and we're just really excited about where we are, what's going on. And the reason why we do it is because it points to the Lord's return. It points to the fact that we're in the latter days, the end times, that lawlessness is on the rise. That was my subject on my blog this morning with these two knucklehead comedians, Stephen Colbert and the Bill Maher, just the foul-mouthed despisers of anything good. I mean, these people should be immediately fired, or we should boycott them. Shame on them for doing what they do. But that just shows you that we're in the end times again, and that's how I link back to it. I just said Timothy warns us of exactly this type of behavior will be one of the hallmarks, the calling cards of the latter days. And you put the UFO phenomenon side by side all this, and it's like, oh my gosh, we're here.
Right.
We're here.
When you look at the total picture of both lawlessness in society and these, seemingly inexplicable events, the UFO sightings, the extraterrestrials, the alien abductions, it's insane. But isn't that what Paul said? In the last days, insane times would come. 2 Timothy 3, and he goes into great detail in describing what that insanity looks like, and you can hold that up next to the front page of any local newspaper, and you see the correspondence between the two, so that you really would have to be spiritually blind not to see the days in which we live. That these are not normal times. And
no, not at all.
It is
and
leading
yet, David,
to.
The church is woefully asleep for the most part. Woefully asleep. It amazes me how pastors refuse to address any of this.
Right, absolutely. Which may also be part of that end time picture too, as we talk about apostasy, spiritual blindness. Scoffers in the last days. I think that's referring to the professing.
Most of the end times.
Right, and I think that's an indictment on the professing church. Unbelievers aren't even interested enough in scoffing. But when you have the professing church that looks at end time events and says nothing's happening here, move along, that's a scoffer. That's a person who is willfully blind. And we could talk all day about the motivation, but the actual experience is undoubtable, that you have a blind church today. And that's why I can say I have never, and I've been a Christian for almost 50 years, church-going Christian, been in the ministry for over 40 years. I have never heard a single sermon or reference within a sermon to UFOs or to Nephilim, or the giants of the Old Testament. Right. Never heard a peep in good, quote, good Bible-teaching churches. It's verboten. It's off limits. It's the stuff of tabloid journalism, but not respectable Bible teaching. It's just not something that we can mention, in respectable company. And so, people who've had these experiences, where do they go? Do they go to their pastor? Probably not. Will they be understood by other church members? Probably not. So they keep things quiet and perhaps question their own sanity.
And David, this is precisely why we made the movie. It's time to take the dirty little secret that's hiding in the church and start an open conversation and not be afraid to talk about what people are experiencing. We should be leading the charge and dominating the conversation. Instead, and unfortunately, we don't even engage in it. Shame on us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're out of time again for today. We do have one more opportunity for those who are joining us today. We will be next week continuing our discussion. We are talking today and last week about a brand new DVD that L.A. and his friends have created. It's called the Watchman Chronicles. I'm holding it up for our camera. In their own words, UFOs are real. And in this DVD, L.A. literally interviews scores of people who say, with one mind, with almost in exactly the same words, I have seen a UFO. And these are not crazy people. People from all walks of life are saying, I have seen a UFO. And this DVD chronicles some of those testimonies. I'm sure you're going to want a copy of this, friends, not only for yourself and your family, but to share with your pastor as well. And so now our announcer, Dane Rome, will share with you how you may obtain a copy of this fascinating DVD.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitger. Dear friends, during Southwest Prophecy Ministries' second anniversary, during the month of September, we're featuring an excellent DVD entitled The Watchman Chronicles. Prepare to have your sense of reality shattered as L.A. Marzulli rips the cover off of the alarming secret that's been hiding in churches around the world, including your own. Today, people from all walks of life are coming forward and revealing what they have seen and experienced. Moms and dads, grandparents, aviation professionals, executives, and blue-collar workers reveal on this DVD the thing that binds them together, that something bizarre is going on. That is their united testimony that I have seen a UFO. You may obtain a copy of the Watchman Chronicles for our second anniversary celebration pricing of a gift of $9.95 plus shipping. That's a 50% off the normal retail price of this DVD. Simply go to the homepage of our website, www.swpm.us, to find the film. The website address again is www.swpm.us. And please join us next week for another Last Days Beacon program brought to you by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Until then, this is Dane Rome. Thanks for listening.